हेलो एवरीवन एंड वेलकम टू अ ब्रांड न्यू वेबिनार ब्रॉट टू यू बाय 5 पैसा। आज हम बात करने वाले हैं एक ब्रांड न्यू फंड के बारे में जिसका एनएफओ लॉन्च होने वाला है एंड दिस टाइम अराउंड द फंड दैट वी बी टॉकिंग अबाउट इज ए मल्टी एसेट एलोकेशन फंड। दिस फंड बीइंग ब्रॉट टू यू बाय ग्रो। और इस फंड के बारे में ज्यादा समझने के लिए हमारे साथ है पारस मतालिया। ही इज द फंड मैनेजर विद ग्रो म्यूचुअल फंड। पारस, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस टुडे। आई थिंक सबसे पहले बेसिक से शुरू करते हैं। मल्टी एसेट एलोकेशन फंड होता क्या है और वो अपने रेगुलर इक्विटी फंड या डेट फंड से कैसे डिफरेंट है?
So first of all, thank you for having me. Great to be here. Uh, let's start at the basics, right? Multi-asset funds are those kind of funds जहाँ पे आपको अलग-अलग asset classes एक ही fund के अंदर मिलते हैं. When we compare it with equity funds, तो वहाँ पे सिर्फ आपको equity यानी कंपनी के stocks में investments होती है. When we talk about debt funds, we talk about कि जहाँ उनके debt papers में investments होती है. So this is a fund where an investor can get exposure to equities, debt, commodities like gold and silver, REITs and REITs, everything within one fund, so that the investor can reap benefits of diversification.
Okay, so कई सारे एसेट क्लासेस विद इन वन फंड। और जब हम आपके फंड के बारे में स्पेसिफिकली बात करें, देयर इज अ प्रोप्राइटरी प्लेटफॉर्म व्हिच यू ऑल हैव स्पोकन अबाउट क्वाइट अ बिट इन योर डॉक्यूमेंट्स। इट्स कॉल्ड शास्त्रा। अब जब मल्टी एसेट एलोकेशन होता है तो उसमें जो टर्म है एसेट एलोकेशन वो सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट होता है। हम ज्यादा भी बात करेंगे इसके बारे में, बट व्हाट्स इंटरेस्टिंग इज दैट यू ऑल आर यूजिंग शास्त्रा फॉर this decision of asset allocation. So could you tell us a bit about this and how this differentiates Grow multi-asset allocation from the others in the category?
Right. So, one of our core strengths as a group is technology and data analytics. So that strength is something that we are trying to bring into the investment world. With that, Shastra जो एक platform है, it helps us take better data-driven decisions rather than subjective calls. We've seen any fund manager, including me, will have biases, will have blind spots. So Shastra will help us, take care of those blind spots, biases in a better way. It will help us with data-driven asset allocation कि जहाँ पे डेटा क्या कहता है आज के हिसाब से, what are different various indicators, various data points, what are they saying, and accordingly हम कैसे उसके basis पे data allocation decisions ले सके, ना कि just based on gut and just based on subjective calls. So it's a combination of man plus machine where Shastra acts like a co-pilot and helps me take better decisions, data-driven decisions.
एक और इंटरेस्टिंग बात है जो आपके प्रेजेंटेशन में हमको दिखाई दी, दैट इज that asset allocation is that one tool या strategy that drives 75 to 90% of the potential returns of a fund. थोड़ा उसके बारे में हमें बताएंगे। जैसे आपने बताया आपके पास एक ऑलरेडी टूल आपने इन हाउस डेवलप किया है, शास्त्रा। सो कुड यू टेल अस हाउ एग्जैक्टली दिस asset allocation strategy is something that value adds versus just simply diversifying funds across assets?
Okay, so if we talk about diversification, first of all, having different asset classes, it can lead to many benefits. It generally leads to potentially lower drawdowns, lower volatility. It potentially can deliver equity like returns in the longer term, while the instances of medium to long term negative instances can come down. When we talk about the importance of asset allocation, तो asset allocation में जो आपने देखा होगा in the presentation कि हमने दो तीन studies mention किए which says that 75 to 90% of asset allocation, of return and risk of an investor is driven by asset allocation, right? थोड़ा theoretical हो जाता है. Let's talk practically. If any investor is investing all of his money in FD, right, today, he can expect to get returns of around 6 to 7% in the longer term. While if the ratio changes to 80 and 100, 80 and 20, which is basically 80 FD, 20 equities, so again the return and risk will change. Return might go slightly higher in the longer term, risk will also slightly go higher. Again, when you change the ratio to say 50-50, again your returns can become slightly higher, your risk will also go higher, right? So a lot of investors, especially in India in last many years, have seen this happening live in their portfolios, where they've started allocating to equity mutual funds while also having FDs, also having their investments in gold. and they have seen their returns and risk profiles of their portfolios changing. So again, driving the point here is basically asset allocation, as in how your asset allocation change, the return and risk parameters of the portfolio will change. So it's very important to have a great asset allocation. It's very important to do asset allocation in the right manner.
Okay, interesting. अभी जो हमें दिख रहा है that you have roughly 10 to 80% of your assets in equity, debt, commodities. So हमें बताइए that how frequently do these allocations change? How frequently do you rebalance? What do you look at when considering rebalancing?
Right. So when we talk about multi-asset allocation funds, as we've discussed, it includes a lot of assets. So data around all those assets has to looked at, which goes and feeds into Shastra. Be it macroeconomic indicators like GDP growth, inflation numbers, be it fundamentals of equity stocks, be it a lot of data around debt instruments, be it the data around commodities, right? So looking at all of these data points, Shastra will give us what kind of allocations look good looking at these data points, and how can we allocate to these asset classes within the ranges that we've set. So even though SEBI allows us to have allocation from 10 to 80%. We want this fund to be a asset diversification fund. ये asset timing fund नहीं बनना चाहिए, asset diversification fund रहना चाहिए, जहाँ पे other than equity, no other asset class should dominate the fund, right? So generally, we've set ranges that equity should trend between 40 to 80, debt should trend between 10 to 35, gold, silver, and commodities should be between 10 to 35, and so on and so forth. Again, rebalancing will happen as and when needed. It's not a periodic rebalance. It will happen when needed, when the data points change, when markets change, and when rebalance is necessary. At that point of time, rebalances will happen.
Okay, understood. Let's talk about अभी जो हमें दिख रहा है मैक्रो एनवायरनमेंट में, बिकॉज एज यूजुअल काफ़ी सारे मिक्स सिग्नल्स है, जियोपॉलिटिकल रिस्क्स है, इन्फ्लेशन थैंकफुली थोड़ा बहुत गिर रहा है जो डेट को बेनिफिट करता है, प्लस जीडीपी के भी इंडिकेटर्स हो रहे हैं. सो आपका फंड ऐसे कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग सिग्नल्स फिर कैसे नेविगेट करता है?
So again, it's a combination of all those factors that you mentioned. For example, if you look at current Indian markets, right, the macros are good. We are going through good growth. If you see, liquidity has been quite good. The interest rates have been coming down. But if you look at sentiment, the sentiment is again not that great, not that bad. So markets have been sideways for the last 1 year or so. So a lot of combination of these factors go in. The data analytics tool platform Shastra helps us to find a lot of relationships between these data points. And again, based on our insights, based on our experience and restrictions that we've put into Shastra, we can do a great allocation within these asset classes. Again, point here is to not do a lot of timing. The point here is to have core asset allocations in equity, debt, gold, and silver, and do tactical adjustments based on current market scenarios. So again, all these data points, even though at times they are conflicting, but at different times, different data points will have more weight depending on what kind of market we are in, and based on that, जो है allocation decide होगा.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about the fact that ये जो हमारा historical data है, if we look at it, तो मल्टी एसेट फंड्स ने रेंज बाउंड मार्केट्स में काफी बेहतरीन परफॉर्म किया है. व्हेन वी लुक एट 10 and 12, 2010 and 2012 या 2021 and 2023. आपके ख्याल से इस समय का जो एनवायरनमेंट है वो मल्टी एसेट फंड्स के लिए कैसे बोल होता है?
So as an AMC, we are very clear that our investors should have a good experience. Without a good experience, they will generally not be able to get good returns. So we are coming out with an NFO in active funds after 8 months. So we are very clear that investors, if at all we are bringing a fund in the market, we bring it at the time where we think the outlook for that category is good. So given the geopolitical concerns that are going on, given the kind of de-dollarization that we are looking at, given the valuation in all these asset classes, I think it's a great time to have a diversified portfolio rather than having a very high tilt in any one asset class. So I think that's why we are coming out with this multi-asset NFO, and I think investors can benefit from this NFO for the next 1.5 year, which generally is when we talk about short to medium term outlook for the category. While we know that in the longer term, multi-asset as a category can be a great category, but even if we talk about short to medium term, I think next 1.5 साल 2 साल maybe this category can do well, looking at all the everything that is going on in the world.
Understood. Okay. Now, if let's just get a bit more of a personal finance perspective here, because your fund, I just want to understand that अगर कोई first time investor है, and they do not have mutual fund holdings, so ऐसे fund में उनको कितना percentage of their savings डालने चाहिए?
So again, as you rightly pointed out, it's a personal finance question. So it will always depend on from investor to investor. But generally, if an investor is coming into the mutual fund world for the first time, I think multi-asset can be a great start because it remains a diversified portfolio. It can potentially have lower drawdowns. It can potentially have lower volatility. And again, coming back to investor experience, because of these reasons, investors will have a good experience, which might lead them to stay invested longer, and become a lifelong mutual fund investor, right? So it can be a good start for a new investor who's just entering the mutual fund space.
Okay, and उन लोगों का क्या जिनके पास ऑलरेडी थोड़े बहुत equity funds है या debt funds है, existing investors basically. So how should they think about adding this fund to their portfolio?
So this fund or a fund like this can become a core allocation of any investor's portfolio because again, diversified hai, you get about 50, 60, 70% of equities, about 10 to 25, 35 gold and silver exposure. You get about 10 to 30, 35 debt exposure. So this can be a core asset allocation portfolio of any investor. And again, who's an existing investor in mutual funds, this can be a very good addition to the portfolio, which will lead to a more diversified exposure within the portfolio. So it can become a core allocation of any investor's portfolio who wants to create long-term wealth with potentially lower drawdowns, lower volatility compared to pure equity funds.
जब बात करें about time horizon of how long should investors try to stay committed to their investments in this fund, इसमें देखो debt portion भी है, commodity portion भी है, so how should they look at time horizon when considering investment?
So obviously the longer the better, but again the minimum time horizon for this fund anyone should be looking at should be at least 3 to 4 years, not less than that.
Okay, so at least 3 to 4 years का investment तो होना ही चाहिए. And also, how should investors think about SIP versus lump sum when it comes to this fund? ऐसा कुछ mantra है that ये particular category के लिए शायद SIP would work better या lump sum would work better, or is it again agnostic, just like any other mutual fund perhaps?
So generally, we've seen कि जब कोई asset class बहुत ज़्यादा volatile होता है या mutual fund category कोई बहुत volatile होती है, there generally SIP works well in the longer term because timing कर पाना बहुत मुश्किल होता है for those kind of funds or asset classes or stocks. Whereas this multi-asset allocation fund is expected to have lower volatility, lower drawdowns compared to equity funds. So यहाँ पे timing करने का बहुत बड़ा challenge नहीं है. So lump sum can be a better way of investing in this fund.
Okay, well, all right. That was a comprehensive summary of everything one needs to know about the Grow Multi-Asset Allocation Fund. NFO, of course, is open. And Paras, thank you so much. इतना beautifully से हमें ये category के बारे में explain करने के बारे में and your own proprietary tool as well. Thank you, Paras, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mubina.
And that brings us to the end of this particular webinar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Tanushree?